Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Greg Papazian. I'm the Emergency Response Administrator here at the Coachella Valley Water District. Thank you for coming, appreciate it. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about our hazard mitigation plan. And kind of at a high level, what we did was assess the natural hazards that could impact us here in the Coachella Valley and how those hazards may impact our critical infrastructure. And we've identified a certain number of mitigation projects to help minimize those risks to our critical infrastructure. With the end goal being, if our critical infrastructure is resilient to power outages, floods, fires, we can provide water and more reliable service to you all, our customers. So with that, I'll hand it over to Cindy Rowley with Black and Beach, who's been spearheading this planning effort in conjunction with the district. And I just want to say that I'm very proud of this hazard mitigation project and the level of community outreach that the district has engaged in, engaging not only with our nonprofit community, but also our local, state jurisdictions and partners who we'd be working with in the event of a large natural disaster emergency. So with that, Cindy.
Good evening. All right, so this is going to be a brief presentation, and I'm asking that this become a participatory presentation. I don't want to stand up here and just speak to you, so please feel free to just raise your hand or ask me a question as we go along so we can have some interactive dialogue. We'll also be, this is live, so there'll be some folks on the computer maybe sending in questions, so we can stop and ask questions as well as we proceed. So, really grateful you all are here, that you took your time out of this evening to come. What this is giving us an opportunity to is to present what is in the draft hazard mitigation plan for the district. We are going to walk through how you access the plan if you haven't been able to do that yet, and also how you give feedback. I'm going to provide just a really, really high-level overview of how the plan was developed, what the contents are, and also help you navigate a little bit of, if you want to review it, where you can get to different sections, how you can use SurveyMonkey to review it. And really what we want to do is we want to hear from you. We already started hearing a few comments about why you're here. So I think the more information you guys can provide us, then the better that we can understand. Let me ask, or do you have a question?
I do.
Yeah.
I'm looking at your map and I'm wondering where Thousand Palms is. I mean, I know where we are, but you've got all the cities listed. You don't have our city listed. So my question is, are we a part of this mitigation plan?
So the boundary, it's a good question. So the boundary of the plan is the Coachella Valley Water District. It's the service area defined by the water district. And so it's addressing all of the critical assets that the district manages. So if I don't, and I'm sorry, I'm not from this area, so did we just not label it?
So it's part of the county.
It's part of the county.
Yeah, and so
okay.
that's within the boundaries.
It's within the boundaries. Okay. So good note. This we can improve our labeling. So thank you. All right. All right. So today we're going to talk about what the district does in terms of hazard mitigation planning on a day-to-day basis, but also what the planning process has been and why we even have a hazard mitigation plan. And as I mentioned, we're also going to go through what the plan is and how to review it. I'm going to give a pretty high-level overview of the risk assessment results and how to interpret those. And then we're going to talk through, thank you all, you guys helped facilitate a lot of the public input from your survey that you helped distribute. So we'll go over some of those survey responses and how that helped inform the plan also. And then we'll go through the next steps of what it's going to take to get the final plan approved by FEMA. All right. So to begin with, how many of you are familiar with the hazard mitigation plan and what they entail? Have you been a part? Okay. Have you been a part of the process? You've been a part of Riverside County process or Imperial or? No? Okay. So it is a FEMA, if you want to become, if you want to be eligible for FEMA grant funding when there's a federal declaration, it is a required document that is necessary. So that is one of the reasons why you would have it. It's Department of Homeland Security requires that you have a approved FEMA hazard mitigation plan that's approved in order to identify what projects will be eligible for federal funding after an event. So that is one of the reasons, but the biggest reason is really to work with neighboring jurisdictions and communities to better understand what your hazards are, to understand what you can do to prevent the impacts. And then really what you want to do is define what is the strategy. So for example, the district coordinated with Riverside County and with all the neighboring jurisdictions we identified to say what are some of the areas of hazards that you're worried about that overlap all these different districts, and understanding what are the things that we can do about it collectively and together. Okay, so this is really where your question was leading at first. So the Riverside County has a hazard mitigation plan, Imperial County has a hazard mitigation plan, the city has a hazard mitigation plan. So the district now also has a hazard mitigation plan, and what is within the district's hazard mitigation plan is what the district has responsibility and ownership of. So it's looking at all the critical assets that help support getting domestic water, stormwater, sanitation, and all of the different irrigation and agricultural drainage. The neighboring jurisdiction's hazard mitigation plan covers your critical assets such as your roads, your bridges, your hospitals, your fire stations, etc. So I think I could pause there to see if you have any questions about what the district is versus what the county and the city.
Is the district just in the unincorporated areas?
The district is serving the service boundary in which the Coachella Valley Water District, the customer base.
I see.
Yeah.
So if you get a CVWD bill, then.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's really looking at how do we identify the hazards that you all, it's very, the hazards affect everybody. There is no district boundary when it comes to hazards, but it's more so how do the hazards affect the critical infrastructure that the district manages in order to provide continuity of services to you all. So that's the focus of this plan. All right, so this is the plan that is just being updated by the district is the second hazard mitigation plan. There was a 2019 plan that was developed, which was the first plan for the district. And part of the process that you do when you go to update your hazard mitigation plan is you review what the previous hazard mitigation plan actions were, and you identify the progress that's been made. So this slide just is a high-level overview of there is 43 mitigation actions defined in the 2019 plan that have been completed but also incorporated as a day-to-day operations when the district. So Greg mentioned when he started this presentation that the district focuses on making sure that their critical assets are as resilient as possible to make sure there's continuity of services when there's an impact, because we know there's going to be impacts. They're coming, they might be coming more frequent with our changing climate as it happens. And so that is one thing the district really focused on is how do we incorporate these hazard mitigation plans into all of our daily operations to make sure that we're as resilient as we can be. 17 large projects were completed. A lot of those projects were focused on flood risk reduction. There's also a lot of projects that were focused on drought. As you all know that you've been under, I don't need to tell you what you've been experiencing for a long time. So there is a lot of focus by the district to help relieve the impacts that everybody in the community was feeling from the drought impacts. The actions were multi-hazard. They addressed flood, drought, wildfire, and earthquake. All right. So here I want to talk a little bit about when we talked about the day-to-day operations where the district covers, excuse me. So a few of these projects are some of the highlights that the district has succeeded in the last 5 years since the last plan update. So as I said, a lot of the focus is on doing stormwater risk reduction and flood risk reduction. Also, wildfire and drought mitigation, looking at making sure some of the projects are making sure that the farmers are able to get access to irrigation water in these times of drought. So that helps also make sure that the aquifer maintains its ability to recharge in these times. And then one of the big projects was also to improve the emergency response capabilities of the district by implementing and designing a new emergency operations control center. In the plan itself also, there's a summary of some of these mitigation success stories that you can access. All right, another big success, I guess, of a regional partnership with the district is the Disadvantaged Communities Infrastructure Task Force. Are you all aware of that task force and the work that they do? Very familiar? All right. So this has been going on for 10 years, or a little under 10 years. And it is something that we were able to try to integrate into the hazard mitigation planning approach. The process this time was capitalizing on the work that the district's already doing and working with the neighboring jurisdictions to understand, are there additional projects that the district can define and put in their mitigation plan that would also be eligible for federal funding to support some of these communities in the eastern Coachella Valley. All right, so here we are. So I don't know, has everybody seen the website that's got the links to the draft mitigation plan? No? Okay. So if you go to the district's website, there is on the opening banner, you'll see an update on the hazard mitigation plan review. So there's a link there. You can go and you can download it. It's 2 different volumes, and I'll go through what's in those volumes. And there's also a survey that's associated with it that's easy for then you to be able to go through and figure out what you want to give comments on. So it's it's a pretty long plan. It's very in-depth, it's very detailed. And so you can choose just to give comments on a portion of the plan, maybe just one portion or all portions if you want. So here's the links as well. And then I think we can probably give you even the website where you can directly access these two. All right, so this is how the plan has been developed. So it is a little bit different. If any of you have familiarity with the 2019 version, we did address the plan in a little bit of a different way to make it more accessible. So part 1 is really where we talk about the process. So I mentioned to you how we document the progress that was made in the 2019 plan. So there's a whole entire section that defines what progress was made and goes into quite great detail. And then chapter 3 really goes into the planning process. How did the district undertake this process in a participatory way? Just to let you know, there's a steering committee that's established within the district. It was made internal because of the sensitivity of the critical assets. But it was a monthly meeting where the steering committee had complete oversight and input in how the plan was developed. There was also a small planning team that was organized to keep the organization and logistics of the plan moving forward. The hazards of concern are one that I'll dive in a little bit deeper. This is where the district identified what hazards are of most concern that we would study and identify what risks are associated with those hazards. And then also chapter 6, if it is actually pretty informative of understanding all the different regulations and programs that the district has to abide by, but also all the different plans and processes that the district has and what they integrate for. So it is a very informative chapter. When we get to part 2, risk assessment, this is really the meat of the whole plan itself. So each hazard is reviewed in depth. The history of the hazard is identified. It goes back however many years, as far as we can go, to identify previous impacts, federal declarations, and very specifically, we look at changes in the last 5 years since the last plan. And then we have a hazard profile for every hazard. So we identify the history of the hazard, the potential of the hazards, and the projection of the hazards as far as future impacts. So we use the best available data. Some of the hazards have quantified data if that data is available, such as landslides. Well, the landslides aren't really a prevalent one for the district, but such as earthquakes. So any data that's available through the federal government, like USGS or FEMA, all of that data is integrated into this plan. And then mitigation plan is really the implementation part. So this is where the district define what goals they want to achieve over the next 5 years. They identify what projects they want to achieve over the next 5 years. And the most important part is, how is the plan going to be maintained and updated as we go forward? Any questions? Any questions? No? All right. And then volume 2, this is really documenting a lot of the processes. So there's, if you really like to get into the weeds and the details of data, you can look at Appendix F, which really gives you all of the outputs of the natural hazard risk assessment. And you can, of interest, to also go and see all the different meeting minutes and everything from all the different meetings that were held in the last 6 months. All right. So with that, I am going to pause and say, does anybody have questions? No? Okay. I just know it sounds, I don't want to speak at you. So, all right, risk assessment results. So the hazards of greatest concerns. So what hazards we studied are, on the left-hand side is the natural hazards. So these hazards all have a lot of quantitative data and that we can use to identify the risks. On the right-hand side are hazards that are of as priority of concern. They just don't have the quantitative data, so they were assessed. It's in a qualitative way. But projects were identified so what we do is we identify the hazards, identify the risk, and then identify what projects are going to minimize the impacts from those hazards. All right, so here is a high-level summary of the risks exposed to the critical assets of the district. So as you see, flood and earthquake were the highest risks identified. And the way that the risk is calculated is through a formula. It's called the Priority Risk Index. And so it's looking at several different factors that build into that risk ranking. So it's probability of occurrence. For the flood, we look at the 100-year and the 500-year probability of occurrence. For the earthquake, we look at multiple different scenarios as well. We also look at the economic value. So the district identified the replacement cost value for all of their assets, and then we identify what potential damage is going to occur from those hazards and what the economic damage is as well. We also look at the impacts to the defined socially vulnerable population within the district and understand how and what percentage of that population will be impacted by these different hazards. The spatial extent, of course. So for like earthquake, the spatial extent is the entire district. For the flood, we use the flood hazard maps provided by FEMA. Yep.
Well, that's the Hillary, is that a 500-year, 1,000-year?
Well, I think, I don't know if it's been finalized, but it's been discussed as a 1,000-year return period. Yeah.
And there was another 1,000-year event a week later.
5
On
days
the
later.
east side, 5 days later on the eastern side of the Coachella Valley.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
you've taken into consideration that we're coming into an El Nino, so all of this stuff is probably going to change a bit because of that?
Yep, for sure, but it's nothing that we will not continue to be prepared for. Yeah. Mhm.
So you've got the levee and dam failure because above us is a levee that's been under, 20 years ago, they had the approval to repair it, and it's never been repaired.
Okay.
And so every rainstorm that comes, that levee overflows, comes down and goes into our community.
And do you know who owns the levee? You don't know who owns the levee? Okay.
Yeah, that levee failed this time, it brought in a nursery.
Yeah.
Up on the top of the hill there, and got all those really great little
Pots everywhere.
planting pots. So maybe some planting pots, you could, we could come over and out of you, because they were all over the street.
Everywhere. And then it comes down and it just, I have a video and you can see the water and the mud coming through. It's already full. My wash right down the street is full. And then there's another video where the mud, where I think that's probably when it broke, is coming down.
And that's in unincorporated county?
That's in
It's-
Thousand Palms, yeah.
Which community?
Tripod.
Both, right, and
Yeah.
Glen.
Yeah, Ivy too got
Yeah,
it.
I'm not gonna, yeah, I'd be right there.
And have you tried to find out, like, through, who would be the
Actually, one of the council members this week, or in their November meeting, Coachella Valley Water, he asked them to come so that he could pose that question to them.
who owns it?
Well, know
Oh.
what they're gonna do about it,
Okay.
so, because it just drawing a blank, dead brain cells, yeah.
All right, it's end of the day.
Yeah. But I know it at one time had an approval to get done, and it never got done, so.
Right, there are actually 3 projects, the diversion projects, that,
By the county or
I
city?
don't know.
I'm
Okay.
not sure which agency, that's why, that's one of the reasons we came here, because we're just learning now.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know and something that we can, but I don't believe it is a district-owned asset.
We can get your contact information and look at some maps and stuff and see what's in
Okay.
our boundaries.
And you can dig into the plan a little bit, and when you get there, you'll be able to see the extent and the risk assessment in which it was studied and what levies were addressed. Most likely they were, I don't know they were most likely the Corps of Engineer accredited levies that would have been assessed, the data we would have had. So this may be new.
That's right, that was the Corps of Engineers that went up there and they did approve it, they've just never done anything with it.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so this I just wanted to give a quick summary. This is a high level. We just did a quick summary of the hazards. So I just wanted to walk through when you go through the plan itself of how to interpret this. So the changes since 2019. So this is a summary. We have a whole entire listing of all the federal disasters. But this graphic itself will just say any changes that have happened in the last 5 years since the last plan and any significant events. Similarly, we give the hazard risk ranking. So here it defines our results of our risk assessment as low, medium, or high. And then when we identify the assets in the hazard area, this is the critical assets. So it's not all of the assets that are impacted by hazards, but it's the ones that are required to do continuity of services for the district. So we identify which assets within stormwater, domestic water, sanitation have the potential of being impacted. And then we have aligned with, when I spoke earlier, you guys are all familiar with the Disadvantaged Communities Task Force. So how the plan was assessed was using that same determination of socially vulnerable populations as annual median household incomes less than 80%. So we have identified within the district boundaries what percentage of the population will be impacted that is defined as a socially vulnerable population based on that same definition. And then the climate projections is identifying what are the potential impacts with our the future predictions of how our climate is changing and how might flood be exacerbated, extreme heat, et cetera. So it's a summary of how, so like earthquake, you'll see if I go here and we talk about the climate projections, there's not a lot of data associated with how climate change might impact frequency of earthquakes, but there are cascading impacts that are associated with earthquakes that would be exacerbated by climate change. So this is just a summary of the two highest risks that were identified for the district, so the earthquakes. So in the last 5 years, there's been no major federal disasters or significant earthquake events. There's a lot of critical assets that are going to be impacted. As you see from the map, the entire district is exposed to some pretty severe potential impacts if there is a significant earthquake. And then when we look at the flood, so this might help look a little bit too. So on the map, what you're looking at is the 0.2% is the 500-year return interval for the flood areas that would be in the high flood. Let's see, it's called SFHA, the flood hazard area. And also the 1% is the 100-year. So if you see, it's a little bit hard probably in the map to see the tan symbology. That is showing that this area has a flood risk reduction associated because there are levees. So that would be interesting to understand. Does this look like it's in the vicinity of where the areas that are in tan?
I'm trying to determine on the map, trying to find Interstate 10, basically. It looks like at the
I
top
think it's
versus
right
Indio Hills, that appears to be a high flood risk area.
Mm-hmm.
And I think right at the border, that seems to just completely stop. Is that where the freeway is?
Well, it was clipped. It does not.
Oh.
It does not stop. We probably shouldn't. It was clipped to define because again, the district was looking at the impacts to the district infrastructure. So the flood hazard data was clipped to the boundary of the district. Yeah. So yeah, flood knows no boundaries. Yeah, we know that.
But it is covering that North Indio, Thousand Palms, Cathedral City, all north of the 10 in flood. FEMA.
Exactly.
That
That's what I was trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
All right. So any questions on the risk assessments or any? Oh, all right. So again, thank you. I think you all were helpful and instrumental in getting some of these surveys out to the community. There's 85 different responses. We may have gone up a little bit in the responses since we did this. So the survey results are available. I believe we have got a link to the survey results on the district's website. I'm just going to go through a couple of the different survey results, but one of them, several of them identified what hazards are of greatest concern, and then of those hazards that were identified as greatest concern, they were included in the hazard mitigation plan as mitigation action. So I'll talk through that in a couple slides. So the question was, which of the hazard events has the community been impacted? So the results you'll see is in the bar chart. Extreme heat, maybe not a surprise to any of you, is perceived as being one of the biggest impacts in the last 5 years, and severe winds and drought. We did talk about a little bit right before we had this presentation of talking about, interesting to see if we issued the survey again now after the August events, if flood would actually be increased, quite a bit.
Do you remember the date that survey went out? End of July, early August?
July
Yeah.
12th.
It was, early, it was in July.
It was starting
Mid-July
July 12th.
and then mid-August.
Before the storm.
And it was out for a good 45 days or so.
Also, it might have been earlier,
Yeah, we had it was out for a long time. And so I just wanted to call out to say that in the hazard mitigation plan, you'll see a table that's got the listing of the 50 different projects that the district is planning or hopeful to be able to do those projects in the next 5 years. And of those projects, a lot of them are addressing drought, extreme heat, and severe wind. And then the next question that we highlighted, which are the hazards that are perceived as the highest threat to the community? Earthquake, aptly so, and drought, as you guys all have been experiencing, extreme heat. And again, looking here at the flood, it'd be interesting to see how much that was still fresh in everybody's mind since August. But the district also, in the 50 projects that have been planned for the next 5 years, have addressed each of these hazards. So the public survey did provide a lot of good input that is aligned where the district is planning their projects. Yes?
When was the survey provided?
We said July 12th was when, I don't,
Yeah, I want to say to like the August 25th or something,
yeah.
or around there.
Mhm.
It was end of August, but obviously before.
How many properties was that covering? How many property owners was that?
Well, we did a lot of different outreach. So the question, I'm sorry, I haven't been good about reframing the questions, but the question was, how many households did the survey reach? So-
It's in the backup stuff. I would have to look. I don't
Okay.
know that off the top of my head.
But the distribution was wide, as you all helped quite a bit, and then through all the different networks throughout the district, they were distributed. So.
Did you get a percentage of participation of all of your outreach?
No, I'll rephrase that question, but
If you reached out to 100,000 people, what percentage of that 100,000, of that 85 that responded was that? Or
Are
yeah.
you saying like the percentage of our customers, or?
You
Percentage of
outreach.
Because it was more than just customers.
Yeah.
The outreach was to not only customers, but partners like county and those who represent other communities.
I just don't know if it's, an acceptable representation, or if you were pleased with the 85 responses, or if that's the norm when stuff like this goes out, or.
Yeah, we did conduct outreach to all the local emergency managers for every city. We also sent it to the county emergency management, Cal OES. Typically the response rate on the surveys are not that high. I know that from other local cities that are engaged in this process. But we did put this out to all of our customer base that live within our service boundaries, and also all of our emergency partners that we partner with in advance of any type of disaster.
And disadvantaged community partners who represent those communities.
And we know that it's not just property owners, it's also owners.
And also our nonprofit community, Coachella Valley Disaster Preparedness Network, was instrumental in helping us spread the word. So we really did try to
Yeah,
cast a wide net, if you will.
it's just something we can share within our network, that when this opportunity comes up and they are asking for input, please take the time
Yeah.
to respond.
Yeah.
And we can do that from our end.
So I have a document that shows all the outreach that was done, if you're
Okay.
interested.
And it's in one of those appendices.
Oh, it's
As well.
it's there too.
Yeah, so it's, I'm not going to go back, but it's on that slide in one of the appendices. There's all the public outreach documentation. I will say one of the most important parts of this process is that it's a participatory process. And I've been involved in, I don't know, many hazard mitigation planning processes. And it depends, I think, of when you've had a recent event, how much energy is, amongst the community members, and also there's just so many different meetings people get asked. I don't know, so
Well, we know it's
yeah.
not sexy.
Yeah.
People are not excited to
Right.
respond.
Right, yeah, but it is an important part of the process, and FEMA actually just issued in April new planning policy that really emphasizes a participatory process. So trying to make any of the hazard mitigation plans that are done anywhere to be able to make sure people are a part of it. So. Okay, so where we're at in the process is that the plan is still available for review for another 5 days. So hopefully you'll be able to get some time to access those links and be able to do some review and add some comments. You can reach out and ask us questions too. And then we will submit. The process is a 2-step process. So the state, Cal OES, does a review, and then it gets submitted to FEMA for a final review as well. So the hope is that by April there will be an approved plan. Coachella Valley already has an approved plan until May of 2024. So the goal is to make sure that we get this next version approved. And again, the big thing is if there is an event and there's a federal declaration, then the district has an ability to go in and access some of the funding that's available to implement some of the projects that are listed in this hazard mitigation plan. So there's all sorts of, and it doesn't actually, and I guess I keep focusing just on if there's an event. The funding also that's available via FEMA is through something called Hazard Mitigation Assistance Grants. So there's a grant program out there called Building Resilient Infrastructure for Communities, the BRIC grant, and that actually is open right now. The application period is open right now. And so there are a few grants out there that are focused on mitigation as well. So that wraps up our presentation. And I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to focus on or share that we didn't cover.
Do you want me
What
to
message?
pull up plan on the website?
Yeah, that'd be great to show you all.
Show what
Yeah,
it is.
that'd be great.
What it
I was
looks like?
just curious, is this PowerPoint available?
I don't believe we've made it available publicly,
Put it
but
on the site.
yeah, but we can. And there is a Facebook Live recording going on right now, so there will be a recording available as well. So.
Techno-nerd, this is pretty cool. But
So this is our page here. You can either access it right from our homepage by clicking there. It's also under the About Us and Projects. Local Hazard Mitigation Plan. And we have the 2 plans listed here. The link to provide comments is here. How many pages is this? 379 pages.
Volume 1. That's just volume 1.
The level of
Yeah.
detail's pretty,
Yeah, it's trying to get to something
You're not
more.
very nice. Yeah.
I think, and then maybe click on the survey, just to show familiarity with the survey. So in that link, provide comments, not our survey,
Oh, yes.
yeah, that one. So this is set up to capture your comments or your questions or anything you want. So this is the form you would fill out and that would come back to us. Or to the district actually, and then we would incorporate any questions or comments into the plan itself.
And so the last one was done, you said, in 2019?
Mm-hmm.
And is it something that you do on a regular basis every 4 years?
Every
or
5 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the district will probably start their process again in hopefully 4 years. Yeah.
And one of the things too, I think one of the key takeaways is we know that we're susceptible to natural hazards. We know that these things are coming. But what's so, I guess, fruitful about this process is we can engage with the community, we can engage with our emergency responders, and we can be forward-leaning and prepare our infrastructure here at the district to ensure that we're providing reliable service to our customers, but also reliable fire suppression to our first responders, reliable wastewater service, those types of things. So it's I guess we're taking a proactive approach to harden our assets and make sure that we have generators at specific sites. We have earthquake shutoff valves at our reservoir sites to conserve water should we have a main break or something like that. So it's a very kind of proactive approach. So that's.
Greg, I know this is a really wide net I'm casting, but how long are those generators expected to run?
It depends on the capacity. So we have some very large our generators here to power our campus and some of our certain critical buildings like our EOC and our control center. And some of the other sites, they might have smaller generators. So it depends on the size of the generator and how much power we would need, like at our booster stations or well sites to keep those operational. So
Are we talking days? Are we
yeah,
talking a week?
it really depends. Potentially, days. I wouldn't say weeks. We would need diesel fuel to continue to
Diesel
power
power.
those.
And you have solar, or
and-
is it?
We've there's some of that is coming online where they have solar capability to power a certain site. We did actually put in solar here at our campus to offset some of our power generation. So we're looking at a number of different things, but there's just a number of things that we're looking at to ensure that our infrastructure is as resilient as possible. We know we get large wind events and storm events on the eastern half of the valley that knocks out power. How can we ensure that we're still providing reliable service to our customers if we don't have power from our power provider? So, just a number of different things that we're looking at. And by identifying these projects, we're really kind of charting a path forward for the next 5 years of how can we make those prioritized investments in our infrastructure to be as resilient as possible.
All right, yeah, and where Lorraine is at in the plan is towards the end of volume 1, and this is the action plan that lists, it's very detailed on talking about what the projects are, what hazards they address, an estimate of the funding even, and then again talking about which potential funding sources are available to fund the projects. Yes?
Did I understand you to say that in order for us to be able to
Well, so this is the district's plan for the district assets. So if you were looking to be involved in like the county or the city and understand what their projects are, that would be where the projects, you'd be participatory process within the district, within the county or the city plan. So the projects that the district lists are mainly to address critical assets for the district to make sure what Greg just said, continuity of services for all of you. But if it's,
I guess what I'm trying to get at is if there was something that happened
uh-huh.
beyond anybody's control, and you need to fix something beyond what's in this plan.
Thank you. It's a good question. The plan can be amended at any time through the 5 years. So there is opportunity to update the plan within that 5 years. It could be a plan amendment. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if it's not listed here, we could still be eligible for federal funding if we do get a major disaster declaration. So we're hopeful, right, everybody in the Coachella Valley is hopeful we'll get a major disaster declaration from the Tropical Storm Hillary. The only entity that has received one so far that I'm aware of is the Agua Caliente tribe. So, you know, we are hopeful that the federal government will open up public assistance so we can apply for reimbursement for the damages that occurred to our infrastructure as a result of that storm event.
Right there.
Yeah, Martinez.
That's the, yeah.
Mhm.
That's
What's your-
39,
are you
that's right
looking
there.
at?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Are those the levies you're speaking about?
Mhm.
All right.
Well, if there's any more questions or concerns, I mean, feel free to reach out. I think Lorraine's contact info is on the website.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we'll be continuing to update the plan, and we'll be bringing it forward for approval to FEMA and Cal OES, and then our board will be hopefully approving it in the spring of 2024. So.
And then the final plan will be available for always access on the district's website. So the draft plan will only be available for the next duration, and we won't have a link to the draft plan because it'll be going through review. So, yeah. Well, thank you all for coming, and you definitely can stay. I mean, we're here, so we can continue to talk, but we'll go ahead and close out the presentation portion of it and just,
Thank you for the
Yeah.
information, very informative.
yeah, thank you. Well, thanks for taking the time to come.